The African sun hung at its zenith, mercilessly scorching the savanna. Tambo, an experienced ranger, wiped sweat from his brow as he moved slowly through the tall, dry grass, alert for any signs of poachers. Recent weeks had brought disturbing reports from different parts of the reserve, traps set not just for lions but other inhabitants of these lands. Protecting nature had always been Tambo's mission, and yesterday's discovery of another dead lioness, the third this month, filled his heart not just with deep sorrow but also with determination to end this lawlessness. His rifle hung across his back as always, though he sincerely hoped he wouldn't need to use it. Clear human footprints led toward a cluster of acacia trees on the horizon. Tension sent chills down Tambo's spine. The poacher's trail was obvious, but the midday heat was clearly slowing his movements and dulling his alertness. Suddenly, the wind carried distant sounds that made Tambo freeze. Listening intently, those he was tracking were closer than he'd thought. Each subsequent step became more difficult, his throat parched with thirst. The radio on his belt crackled briefly before falling silent. Communications had always been unreliable in this part of the reserve. Despite the difficulties, the ranger pressed on, determined to find the dangerous traps before nightfall. Tambo tried to ignore his weakening muscles and slight dizziness. In his years serving the reserve, he'd faced far more dangerous situations. Today seemed no different. The sun burned his back relentlessly as he moved through grass already yellowing from the heat. His canteen held only a few warm sips he was saving for emergencies. Each breath scorched his lungs as if inhaling desert sand. Hours of searching under the blazing sun gradually drained his physical and mental strength, each step becoming harder, his vision starting to blur strangely. Suddenly, something flashed in the dry grass, a rusted wire trap, cleverly concealed, ready to snap shut on any large animal unfortunate enough to trigger it. Tambo's heartbeat quickened as he realized he was on the right track to finding the poacher's hideout. As he carefully bent to examine the trap's mechanism, an inexplicable anxiety prickled his consciousness. Something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what. The ranger cautiously took another step, failing to notice the pit concealed beneath sharpened stakes. The ground suddenly vanished beneath him, his world turning upside down in an instant. The fall lasted barely a second, yet to Tambo time seemed to stretch, allowing him to clearly see the ominous sharp stakes rising toward him. A searing pain shot through his leg as a stake impaled it, black spots dancing before his eyes threatening to swallow his consciousness. His desperate cry echoed across the empty savanna, with no one nearby to hear, only indifferent vultures circling high above, the sole witnesses to his misfortune, patiently awaiting a potential feast. When the first wave of shocking pain subsided, Tambo tried to soberly assess his situation. The pit wasn't deep, but with a severely injured leg, climbing out seemed nearly impossible. Blood seeped steadily from the wound, soaking into the dry earth, leaving dark stains. With growing fear, the ranger realized the inevitable: the scent of blood would attract predators. The radio remained silent. Communications had always been unreliable in this remote part of the reserve, and now seemed completely dead. As the sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, though the scorching heat abated, Tambo knew well that African nights brought different but equally deadly dangers. Summoning his remaining strength, he made several desperate attempts to free himself from the trap, but each time the agonizing pain in his impaled leg forced him back. Cold despair slowly tightened around his throat like an invisible noose, sapping his last reserves of strength. After several painful attempts, he finally managed to grab a sturdy root at the pit's edge and, with incredible effort, dragged his exhausted body to the surface. Collapsing in the shade of a solitary acacia tree, his leg continued bleeding, his head spinning from pain, dehydration and fever. A distant rumble, was it an approaching storm or the warning roar of some large predator? Darkness swam before his eyes as Tambo slipped into unconsciousness, defenseless in the hostile wilderness. A low, rumbling growl gradually pulled Tambo from the dark void of unconsciousness. His body felt leaden, his throat so parched swallowing was difficult. Yet ancient self-preservation instincts forced him to open his eyes and try to comprehend his situation. Blurry golden shapes moved about in the sunset's glow, but his foggy mind couldn't piece together the image. Suddenly, Tambo realized a massive lion stood just paces away, observing the helpless man with piercing amber eyes. The predator's muscles rippled beneath thick skin as it slowly circled Tambo at a distance, seemingly assessing both his threat level and the severity of his condition. A tense lioness froze nearby, and from behind her powerful paws peeked a curious cub. Icy fear gripped Tambo's heart, but his weakened body wouldn't obey. He couldn't even move. The scent of fresh blood from his open wound had undoubtedly attracted these dangerous predators. Mentally preparing for the inevitable attack, for rending claws and deadly fangs, Tambo was astonished when none came. The large male with a magnificent dark mane cautiously approached, sniffed deeply at the blood-scented air, then emitted a quiet, almost thoughtful grunt. In that moment, Tambo noticed an unusual mark on the lion's ear, a distinctive curve that felt strangely familiar. The lioness repeated the male's actions, then to Tambo's amazement, calmly lay down beside her cub as if settling for the night. Increasingly astonished, Tambo realized an incredible truth. These wild animals weren't seeing him as prey, but seemed to be guarding him. His mind reeled at this unbelievable situation, but overwhelming fatigue began claiming his consciousness again. His final thought before darkness took him was that these powerful predators, for some inexplicable reason, had become not his enemies but his protectors. Tambo's consciousness ebbed and flowed, allowing brief assessments of his surroundings before slipping away again. Through the haze of exhaustion and fever, old memories surfaced from years ago, when he was a young, inexperienced ranger just starting in this same part of the reserve. He'd heard the desperate cries of a lion cub caught in a poacher's trap. Casting caution aside, he'd rushed toward the sounds. That day he'd found a terrified cub trapped in cruel wire, its left ear severely damaged. That same distinctive curve now seemed so familiar. Nearby, a lioness ran desperately, her roars filled with anguish. Knowing the deadly risk, Tambo couldn't leave the innocent creature to suffer. Moving slowly, he'd approached, cut the wires with his knife, freeing the cub. To his amazement, the lioness hadn't attacked but watched him with what seemed like understanding and gratitude. Now, as he lay beneath the acacia, this memory flashed clearly. Was this massive lion guarding him the same cub he'd saved, grown into the king of beasts? The ear marking couldn't be coincidence. Miraculously, that fragile connection formed years ago between human and wild hadn't broken but had created an incredible cycle of mutual aid. The setting sun cast golden light across the savanna, painting everything in warm amber. The air cooled, filled with evening scents and distant insect hums. Tambo lay motionless in the shade, his body racked with pain and fever, yet his mind grew strangely sharp realizing the lion's extraordinary proximity. He named the great male Orion, who sat watchfully nearby, eyes gleaming mysteriously in the gathering dusk. Those amber eyes seemed so sharp they sent chills through Tambo, as if containing ancient wisdom, as if nature itself judged a man, weighing every action of his life. The lioness and cub nestled against the mighty male, their bodies relaxed yet ears constantly twitching, catching the savanna's faintest sounds. They weren't just nearby, they were actively guarding their unexpected charge. In his semi-delirious state, Tambo saw the lioness approach his injured leg and do something incredible. She began carefully licking the wound as if tending her own cub. The rough tongue caused excruciating pain, but Tambo forced himself not to move, instinctively understanding this strange care might save him from deadly infection. As hyenas appeared at the clearing's edge, their evil giggles echoing through the evening air, Tambo was helpless against the approaching threat. Yet no intervention was needed. Orion lifted his massive head and unleashed a thunderous roar that sent the hyenas scattering instantly. The majestic sound rolled across the savanna like storm, silencing all potential nocturnal predators for miles. In that moment, Tambo realized an astonishing truth. The lions weren't just curiously observing an injured human but were purposefully protecting him from the wilderness's other dangers. Whether instinct, memory of past rescue, or something deeper and inexplicable, these mighty predators had consciously chosen not to kill a helpless man but to stand as his guardians under the African stars. Flashes of memory surfaced through Tambo's delirium years ago, when he'd been a green ranger just starting in this same reserve. The desperate cries of a lion cub trapped in poacher's wire had called him past all caution. That day he'd found the terrified cub with its left ear mangled by cruel metal, that same distinctive curve he now recognized. Nearby, a lioness had roared her anguish. Knowing the deadly risk, Tambo had still approached slowly, knife in hand, cutting the wires while the mother watched, not with rage but what seemed like desperate hope. When freed, the cub had bolted to its mother, who then locked eyes with Tambo in what could only be called gratitude. Now as he lay beneath the acacia, this memory burned clear. Was this majestic guardian the same cub he'd saved? The ear marking couldn't be coincidence. Somehow, that fragile bond formed years ago hadn't broken but had woven itself into an extraordinary circle of mutual salvation. The setting sun painted the savanna gold as Tambo lay motionless, his body racked with pain yet his mind startlingly clear about the lion's proximity. He named the great male Orion, who sat watching with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom, as if nature itself judged a man's worth. The lioness and cub rested nearby, ears constantly twitching, not just present but actively standing guard. In his haze, Tambo saw the lioness approach his wound and do the impossible. She began gently licking the injury as if tending her own cub. The rough tongue brought agony, but Tambo stayed still, instinctively understanding this might prevent deadly infection. When hyenas appeared at the clearing's edge, their evil giggles echoing through the twilight, Orion's thunderous roar sent them scattering. The sound rolled across the savanna like storm, silencing nocturnal predators for miles. In that moment, Tambo understood, these lions weren't just near him but protecting him. Whether by instinct, memory, or something deeper, they'd chosen to shield rather than kill him. At the ranger station, tension thickened with each passing hour. Tambo hadn't returned from patrol, and all attempts to contact him had failed. As night faded into dawn, the dangers lurking in the vast wilderness grew ever more real. Led by his closest friend, Juma, a team of determined rangers prepared for a search mission, fully aware of the risks: armed poachers, deadly dehydration, or wild animal attacks. "We must find him before nightfall," Juma declared, methodically checking his rifle. "We've already lost 2 rangers to poachers. I won't let Tambo be the third." Armed and accompanied by experienced tracker dogs, the team set out along Tambo's planned route, scanning the parched savanna for any sign of him. Hours passed under the relentless sun, but they refused to give up. Then a young ranger spotted boot prints leading toward a solitary acacia tree on a hillside. Without hesitation they followed, only to freeze in shock. A pride of lions stood near the tree, watching them intently. Juma's grip tightened on his rifle, finger hovering near the trigger. Had they arrived too late? Had the lions already claimed his friend? But then, something extraordinary happened. The massive male leading the pride, a lion with a dark, flowing mane, turned its head toward the tree as if deliberately guiding them. For wild predators, this behavior was unheard of. Heart pounding, Juma took cautious steps forward, following the lion's silent direction. There, hidden in the tall grass, lay Tambo, unconscious but alive. "He's alive," Juma shouted, relief flooding his voice. The other rangers moved carefully, preparing to lift Tambo onto a stretcher. All the while, the lions remained unervingly close. When Juma's radio suddenly crackled to life, the lions tensed, muscles coiling, yet they didn't attack. "Last year, I watched these same lions tear apart 2 careless tourists," murmured a gray-haired ranger, barely above a whisper. "But today they saved a man's life." The other lions lingered at a distance, their golden eyes gleaming in the morning light. Not one showed aggression, only quiet vigilance. Then Orion, the great male, let out a low, almost longing sound before deliberately stepping aside. The message was unmistakable. The lions had guarded Tambo through the night, but now they willingly surrendered him to his people. The cub darted forward, nuzzling Tambo's limp hand, a fleeting, poignant touch between 2 worlds. As the rangers carefully loaded Tambo into the waiting jeep, Juma cast one last glance back. Orion stood tall, watching them with unwavering focus, a silent guardian of the savanna, a keeper of the ancient, unspoken bond between man and wild. The steady hum of the engine and the hushed voices of his comrades slowly pulled Tambo back to consciousness. Pain radiated through his body, his throat burned with thirst, but above all, he was alive. Blinking against the harsh daylight, he met Juma's relieved gaze. "We thought we'd lost you, old friend," Juma said hoarsely. "When we found you surrounded by lions, they could have torn you apart in seconds. Instead, they guarded you like one of their own." Memories flooded back, the scorching heat, the trap, the searing pain in his leg, and the lions. "They never harmed me," Tambo whispered, his voice cracked. "Orion. That lion with the dark mane, years ago when he was just a cub, I saved him. I recognized the scar on his ear." After all this time, he remembered. Juma exchanged an incredulous look with the others. "They truly were protecting you. I've never seen anything like it." Tambo's soul swirled with disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Whatever had happened on that savanna, one thing was certain: he had survived not in spite of the lions but because of them. During his long recovery, Tambo never stopped thinking about the poachers. Men whose cruelty had nearly cost him his life and had already claimed so many majestic creatures. Studying maps and reports of previous traps, he began noticing a pattern others had missed. "I know how to catch them now," he told the veteran station manager one morning. "They always return to check their traps 3 days after setting them. It's part of their routine." The next day, a carefully selected team of rangers lay in wait near the site where Tambo had almost died. Their patience was rewarded at noon when 3 armed poachers appeared, inspecting their deadly handiwork. At Juma's signal, the rangers moved in. One poacher tried to flee but was swiftly tackled. The others surrendered without a fight. "You kill lionesses just for their claws?" Tambo demanded, barely containing his fury. The lead poacher smirked. "Chinese healers pay well. Just business." "And how much is a human life worth?" Tambo asked quietly, gesturing to his bandaged leg. "Or an entire species wiped from the earth?" A week later, the local paper reported their sentencing: maximum prison terms and heavy fines. But for Tambo, something far greater mattered. When he finally returned to patrol, Tambo spotted Orion watching from a distant outcrop, his golden mane rippling in the wind. Their eyes met across the savannah, not as strangers or potential enemies, but as 2 beings bound by profound, wordless understanding. The lion's territory was safe now. No more traps. No more poachers. Tambo's journey had begun with a simple wish to protect wildlife. Yet in his darkest hour, the wild had protected him in return. Fear had given way to trust, forging a bond that would never be forgotten. Nature, it seemed, still held miracles, reminders that the connection between man and beast ran deeper than cruelty, greed, or destruction. And in the golden light of the savannah, that truth shone brighter than ever.